Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining today's class. We are going to be making a chocolate covered strawberry cake. So I will go over some of the supplies that we'll need for today's class, starting with Satin Ice Cake Drip. This is one of our newest products, and it's a chocolate-based drip that we'll be putting down the sides of the cake, and we'll also be using this to make chocolate covered strawberries. And we'll go over more details about this product while we're using it. We will also be using the Satin Ice White Buttercream. I put down for the class that we'll probably be using around 2 pounds, and that's what I have here. So I have 2 1-pound pails. We are using the bright white, and it's a vanilla flavor, but we're going to be turning it into more of a strawberry flavor. And to do that, we're going to be using freeze-dried strawberries, which you can get at your local grocery store. We can also go to the overhead camera, and I'll basically be able to show you guys better what we're looking at. But we will be using the freeze-dried strawberries. These ones I got on Amazon, but they do have them at some grocery stores as well. I know that Target carries them. So I already crushed mine up. You want to do a cup of the freeze-dried strawberries and then crush them up to be very fine. You can use a food processor, or you can even use like a rolling pin and crush them up. I'll show you how you could do that too in a little bit.
The freeze-dried, is there anything else you can use? Somebody couldn't find it.
Someone couldn't find freeze-dried strawberries. You could try, if you need a strawberry flavored buttercream and you can't find the freeze-dried strawberries, you can always use a strawberry extract. You can also try adding maybe strawberry preserves to your buttercream. We are also going to be using that today in the center or the fillings of the cake, but I wouldn't recommend using fresh strawberries for it because I think that will add too much moisture. But like I said, I've definitely seen these at Target, and I got mine on Amazon. So like I said before, I also have strawberry preserves, and I'm going to just do like a thin coating of this in between our layers to give it that extra strawberry flavor.
Frozen strawberries?
No, I wouldn't use frozen strawberries. And then I also have my fresh strawberries here. This is what we're going to dip in the melted cake drip. I have an open star piping tip. And the reason why I'm using an open star one is because since we are using the freeze-dried strawberries, there might be some chunks in the buttercream from that. So I want it to still be able to come through the piping bag and the piping tip. So that's why I'm using an open star. I have a piping bag, some scissors, a spatula, an offset spatula for when we're decorating the cake. I have a small bowl. So when I melt the cake drip, we're going to pour that into this bowl so we can dip the strawberries into it. And I have a cake turntable. This makes it really easy to decorate your cakes and to achieve smooth sides. I have a cake board, an icing smoother or a bench scraper. I have my cake layers and a mixer. I do want to start with the strawberries only because I want those to set up before and I don't have access directly to a fridge. So Joyce is going to heat up the cake drip for me. What you want to do is you want to remove the cap, and there's going to be a food safety seal. And you'll notice the cake drip is very hard in the bottle. That's because it's a chocolate product. So you want to remove the cap, peel off the food safety seal, and just microwave it in 30-second intervals until it's liquid, and you want to shake it in between. Keep that removed though. Okay, so Joyce is going to heat that up for me, and I'll show you my cake layers while that's happening. So I actually got my cake layers from my local grocery store, and that's a good hack if you don't feel like baking your cakes. You can go and ask for your chocolate cake or your vanilla cake. I'm working with, I think they're about 7 inches, 7-inch round layers. So that's what I have here. And what I do, a nice tip is I like to work with my cake layers frozen. And that's because it just helps the cake be more sturdy while I'm decorating it. It helps the crumbs not get all over the place. So I definitely recommend working with a frozen cake. Okay, so I think Joyce has the cake drip heated up for me. I think this is probably a good consistency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some cake drip into this bowl, just enough to cover maybe like, since I am working with a smaller cake, maybe it's like 6 strawberries I'm going to be dipping. We want to make sure we save enough cake drip in this bottle to do the drip along the top of the cake. So really, I'm putting just enough to dip the strawberries, enough so that I can actually dip them. And like I said, we want to make sure that we have enough left in this bottle to do a drip cake. Okay, so I poured the melted cake drip into this bowl. I'm going to take my fresh strawberries that I washed and I patted dry. And what's nice about the cake drip is it actually melts to a very thin consistency. And that's the thing. If I was making regular chocolate covered strawberries that I was going to be like serving at a party, I don't know if I would be using cake drip, just because it does have more oils in it than a typical dipping chocolate. And that's because you get the drip effect from it. So it doesn't harden as much as a traditional melting chocolate would that you would typically use for chocolate covered strawberries. But we are using it today because we're using the cake drip for the drip. And this is going to work perfectly because we're just going to be putting them on top of the cake. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking my strawberry, lightly dipping one side and just kind of spinning it. And you'll see that it gives a really nice even coat because it's on the thinner side and the excess just drips right off. And then I'm placing them on a little board that I have here covered with foil. You could also do it on a plate with parchment paper, whatever you have available. Okay, so I'm going to continue dipping the strawberries. And honestly, if this works for you and you like dipping it into the cake drip, it's a good solution, because I know a lot of the times the melting chocolate can be on the thicker side. So this works out really good. You can just keep them in the fridge. Like I said, the only downside to using this for chocolate covered things is that it's a little bit on the thinner side, so it might not harden as much. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit more into my bowl. I have 2 more strawberries to dip. And so these are just going to be a garnish on top of our cake. So again, if you don't even have access to this right now, the strawberries, that's okay. It just adds a nice finish to the cake. Okay, my last strawberry. Just want to get them coated. No, my stem fell off of this one, so this is going to be hard to get out. Let's see. Okay. So all of my strawberries are coated with the chocolate, and I'll show you here. So I wanted to do these first so that the chocolate sets up, and you'll notice how fast it actually starts to set up, but depending on the climate of the room you're in, it could take, sorry, my top camera keeps sliding, so if I have to fix it, that's why. So if I was in a really hot climate, it might not want to set up as fast, and that's why you would keep it in the refrigerator. But I don't have access to that right now, so I wanted to do those first to make sure that these do set up so I can place them on top of the cake. Okay, so the next part that we're going to do is actually start making the strawberry buttercream, and then we can start assembling the cake. For the strawberry buttercream, we're going to be using the Satin Ice ready to use white buttercream. And it's ready to go out of the pail. If you wanted to just use vanilla buttercream that's white, you can peel off the top and you can just give it a little stir, put it in a piping bag or spread on top of your dessert. It's ready to go. It tastes delicious. It's a beautiful bright white color, so it takes food coloring very well. And the vanilla isn't so strong that you wouldn't be able to add an additional flavor to it to customize it. Like today, we're going to be turning this into a strawberry buttercream. We did develop a few recipes with this as well. You can find on our website, satinice.com, and our Pinterest. So you'll see a bunch of different recipes that you can make using this buttercream. But we are going to be using 2 pounds of this today to make the recipe. And so I just have 2 1-pound pails. And what we're going to do is we're just going to transfer this into our mixing bowl. And I'm using a KitchenAid mixer today with a paddle attachment. You can also just use a mixing bowl with an electric mixer and the beater attachments. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to transfer this in. One thing I'll say about the buttercream too is if you're in a colder temperature, you might notice that the buttercream is more of a firmer texture. And if you're noticing that, you can even just take the top off and put it in the microwave for 5 seconds and it comes right back to the perfect consistency. You can even add a little bit of liquid to it if needed, but I find the microwave works great. And it's very cold here in New York, so I actually had to do that before the class. Okay, so I'm just transferring the buttercream into the bowl. And I'll do this with the other container as well. And all we're going to do is we're going to mix this with the crushed freeze-dried strawberries. And it's going to turn the buttercream a nice, beautiful light pink color. Okay. You just want to make sure that you get it all out of the pail. It smells delicious already. Okay, so my buttercream is inside of the mixer. I'm going to move some stuff around so that you can see what I'm doing. It's hard to see with this mixer, but it's the best I can do. So I have my 2 pounds of buttercream into the bowl. And what I did was I took the freeze-dried strawberries, which are actually, they're not whole strawberries. They're freeze-dried strawberry slices. And I put them in this measuring cup. I measured 1 cup of them. And then I took a rolling pin, a fondant rolling pin, and I crushed them like this all the way until it was more of a fine powder. I do have small little chunks in there, but that's okay. You really want it to get that fine powder because it's going to disperse the flavor better. Ideally, it'd be best to use a food processor, but if you don't have that, like I said, you can use a rolling pin like this, or you can even put it in a Ziploc bag and smash it that way. Okay. So let's add it. I'm going to start mixing this buttercream. And I'm going to slowly add the freeze-dried strawberries that I crushed up. Again, I put 1 cup in here, and then I smushed it down to make it more of a powdered, crushed form. Okay. So I'm just going to scrape the sides, scrape the bottom, make sure everything's incorporated. But these freeze-dried strawberries were great because you're not adding any extra moisture into the product. So if you were going to be using fresh strawberries, I'd be a little bit nervous about that because the moisture from the strawberries would get into the icing and it might cause it to get too soft. But it really turns it into a beautiful light pink color. All right, I'm just going to give it a little bit of an extra stir. Okay, so now we have strawberry buttercream. If you find that you want even stronger strawberry flavor, you could add a little bit of strawberry extract to this. You could just start with small amounts until you reach the flavor you want, but I think the strawberries alone add a nice flavor. Okay. All right, so now we're going to be able to assemble our cake.
What are the ingredients in the drip? One like this doesn't say.
Someone wants to know what the ingredients of the cake drip are. If you also want to know that, you can go on to satinice.com, and we, on each of the product listings, we actually go through the ingredients. Okay, so I'm just going to give this one last little stir. But look how beautiful this looks. And you actually see some of the strawberry specks, and it smells really good. I think strawberry and chocolate is a really, really good combination, especially for Valentine's Day. Okay, so now I'm going to bring my turntable back, and this turntable is super important to me when I decorate any cake because it really does the work for me as I spin. I spin and it helps me smooth the cake, decorate it quickly. It's a really, really good tool. Okay, so first we're just going to put our cake board on, and I'm using these cake layers about like 6.5 inches to 7 inches. So I'm using an 8-inch cake board. Someone have a question?
They're asking, do you have a 6 or an 8-inch cake? So
okay, perfectly. I answered the question. Whatever size cake, if it's bigger, that's okay. All right, so let's get started. So I will be using my offset spatula, and this is also a really great tool because this allows you to smooth the cake and spread the frosting in between the layers and all that good stuff. What I like to start out with is a small little dollop onto the cake board. This kind of acts as glue so that the cake doesn't move around, and it kind of secures it to the cake board. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that, and I'm going to put my first cake layer down. You always want to make sure if you're using this, if you're working on the cake board that you're going to use to serve the cake, that it's a little bit bigger than your cake layer. This way it's easy for you to pick it up and transport it. So you just want to make sure it's secured to it and it's in the center. And now I'm going to just put a dollop of strawberry buttercream on top of this layer. I do like to be a little bit conservative because I always like to make sure that I have enough buttercream. The worst thing that happens is when you're almost done decorating a cake and you run out of buttercream, whether it's a specific color or anything like that. So I always like to be a little bit conservative, not too much that there's no icing, but I like to make sure that I have enough for the end of the cake. And you want a good ratio of cake and icing. You don't want it to be too much of one thing. I actually think I'm going to secure, can I see this? I'm going to use this tape. Thank you. So I'm noticing my cake board is sliding a little bit on the turntable. So I'm actually going to just take some tape and secure it down. That didn't work. I'm just going to add some pieces of tape. Some people might have like those silicone mats that go on top of your turntable, and that always helps. But if you don't have that, you could just use some tape to help secure it. Okay, so before we add the next layer, I kind of wanted to add a little bit of strawberry flavor to the cake. So I do have some strawberry preserves. This is optional. I'm not doing a ton of this on the cake, so I'm not going to be doing a border. Normally, if you're adding a filling in between layers, you would do what they call a dam around the cake, and you would just pipe a layer of buttercream along the edge of the cake, and that kind of holds in the filling so that it doesn't bulge out the sides of the cake. I'm just doing this as like an extra little flavor into the buttercream. So I'm probably doing like maybe a teaspoon onto each layer. And I'm just going to kind of spread this into the buttercream so I don't have to worry about creating a little border on the sides of my cake or like a dam, because this is just a really thin layer and I think it's just going to add some extra flavor. So a nice little thin layer. Okay, we're gonna add our next layer. Today for this cake, I'm working with 3 layers. You can work with however many layers you want. Just make sure that you have enough buttercream. So if you were working with more cake layers or a larger cake, you could always add another pound of buttercream. Just make sure you supplement that with more crushed freeze-dried strawberries. So you might have to add, we did a cup of freeze-dried strawberries per 2 pounds. So if you add another pound, just do another half a cup and you'll be good to go. Okay, so we're gonna dollop some more buttercream onto this layer. And I'm just using my offset spatula to just carefully spread this around on the cake layer. And like I said earlier, if you joined a little late, I like to work with my cake layers frozen. And the reasoning for that is because it just makes the cake a little bit sturdy and it helps there not be so much crumbs when you're coating it. Okay, so again, I'm going to add some strawberry preserves. And again, I'm just going to do like a teaspoon. We don't want to do too much that it's going to cause the cake to slide around and that it's going to ooze out of the sides of the cake. So really just like a little spoonful. And I kind of just smooth that into the buttercream. And I just got my preserves from local grocery store. And these are nice because it actually has chunks of strawberries in it. So that's cool. Okay. So.
Did you put the preserves on before the icing? Like under?
No, I did. Did someone ask? So someone asked if I put the strawberry preserve.
No, can you?
Oh, someone asked if you can put the strawberry preserves on the cake before you add the buttercream. You can totally do that. If you want to just put that on the cake and then add your buttercream, that works too. Now I'm going to add my final layer. And here's another tip. When you add your final layer, I flip it so that the bottom of the cake becomes the top, because the edges are always sharper that way. You get a nice clean edge. So what I'm doing is I'm just pressing it down and making sure it's even. And I just like to give it a little press because I like to make sure that all the air is out of the cake layers in between. Okay. Hands are a little messy. I just have to clean my hands off. The cake drip is a chocolate flavor. And today we are working with the brown. So it's I believe it's dark chocolate. Yes, it's a dark chocolate flavor. The white cake drip and any of the colors are a white chocolate flavor. Okay. So now we have our layers constructed, and now we are just going to, I'm going to just do a thin layer of buttercream right now to kind of do almost like a crumb coat. We want to lock in the crumbs so that you don't have chocolate specks in your final coat of icing. So I'm going to I just dollop some on top, And I'm just going to carefully smooth this out on the top, and we'll start to bring it down the sides a little bit. And with this cake, it's okay if you don't get a completely smooth coverage because we do have those chunks of strawberry in the icing. So we're just going to take some down the sides as well. Again, we just want to do like a thin coating right now just to make sure that we lock in the crumbs. What you can also do is if you have any buttercream that's kind of sticking out from your layers, you can just smooth that out too. So again, we're just doing a thin coating right now, just to lock in the crumbs. If you notice that your cake slides a little bit if you use the preserves, you can always put your cake back into the refrigerator or even the freezer for a little bit to solidify it, so it makes it easier to decorate. You notice mine is sliding a little bit, even though I only used a little bit of the jam. So hopefully it stays straight. Even if this cake doesn't come out perfect, it's still going to taste delicious because the flavors are good. I think this frosting would be really good on top of a tray of chocolate brownies too. You don't always have to use buttercream on cake. Okay, so my crumb coat is almost done. I have one little section left. And I'm just going to try to smooth it as best I can. Like I said, you might not get the perfectly smooth edge cake with this buttercream because we are using strawberry buttercream and it has chunks of strawberries in it. Okay, so everything is crumb coated for me. Smooth it out as best I can, a little bit more. And the technique that I'm doing here with the turntable is I'm just kind of holding the offset spatula on top with light pressure, and the turntable is doing all the work for me. And this motion might take some practice, so it's okay if you don't really get it at first or if it feels a little awkward. And for the sides, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just holding the, oh, I'm taking up some crumbs right now, so I'm gonna make sure that that's covered. Typically, after you do a crumb coat, you would stick your cake in the fridge. But if you're working with a frozen cake, you might notice that your crumb coat kind of sets as you're doing it. So that's also a benefit of using a frozen cake. This is getting a little messy. Okay. I'm leaving my crumb coat alone now. And just you kind of want to make sure that your cake is as smooth as possible before you do your final coat. And for the edges, what I like to do is I like to, any of the buttercream that comes up the edge when I'm smoothing the sides, I just pull that into the center and it helps create a really straight edge. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to add more buttercream. So let me see how much buttercream I'm working with in my bowl, because I also want to make sure that I have enough to pipe at the top. If I end up not having enough to pipe dollops at the top, then I'm just going to lay the strawberries on top. So that will look just as pretty. Again, I'm sorry that my camera is sliding like this, but I'll try to fix it as much as I can when I notice it. Okay.
You have a fondant roller on
Yes,
the
so
list, that's only.
the reason why I had the fondant roller on the list was if someone didn't have a food processor, and because I used it to crush the freeze-dried strawberries. I put the freeze-dried strawberries into this measuring cup and I just kept jabbing at them, and it creates a little dusting of the strawberries.
Do you have to worry about moisture as the cake layers defrost?
You don't have to worry about moisture. I've never had a problem with that. I would say keep after you're done decorating the cake, keep it in the fridge for a little while for it to kind of all settle and allow it to not come to like extreme temperatures, especially in the summer if you're doing like working with a cake layers that are frozen. As soon as you're done decorating it, just put it in the fridge so that it can get back to an unfrozen state without having a lot of condensation. So now I'm just kind of adding more buttercream to the top and to the sides. And then we'll do a final smoothing. I'm not positive I'm going to have enough buttercream for the dollops on the top of the cake because I think my cake is a little taller than I anticipated. And that's okay. Sometimes when you're decorating a cake, you have to improvise. So we're just adding more buttercream to our cake. And again, this is not going to be a completely smooth cake because we're working with strawberry buttercream that has speckles of strawberries in it. So it's not going to be completely smooth. It could have a bit of a bumpy texture. Okay, once you have your cake completely covered and you don't see any more cake underneath, that will be the point that we can start smoothing it out. And that's where your cake smoother is going to come into play. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold your, let's try to get in the camera. We're going to hold your cake smoother and touch it lightly to the cake. You don't want to jab it into the side of the cake. You kind of want to just like hover it over the icing gently with not too much pressure. You don't want to scrape all the icing off when you do this. This is just to get it so it smooths the sides as best as you can. So we're just going to hover over the icing. And as we do that, I'm going to turn the turntable. And again, the turntable is doing all of the work for me. And it's going to smooth the sides of the cake. And then some extra buttercream comes off with that. And then at this point, with any of your extra buttercream, if you notice any like air pockets or holes on your cake, you can just kind of fill those in and we'll do another pass through. Okay, so before I do another pass through on the sides, I'm going to smooth out the top because again, I want to use that technique where I pull the edges of the cake in to get that sharp edge. So at the top, I'm going to just hold my spatula a little bit at an angle. Again, not pressing deep into the cake, kind of hovering over the icing enough to smooth it out, but not scrape a ton of the icing off. So I'm kind of holding it at an angle, using my turntable to do the work for me. And as I'm spinning, I'm just going to slowly drag the spatula off, and that helps kind of not move the icing around too much. Okay, so now that the top is smooth, we're gonna go back to the sides. And again, we're just going to hold the spatula. I kind of hold it a little bit on an angle. And again, we're just going to go up to the icing, and we're going to turn the turntable, and the turntable is going to do the work for us. Smoothing the side of the cake completely perfect takes a lot of practice, because this might feel like an awkward movement. But I promise, the more cakes you do, the smoother the sides of your cake will get. And again, we're working with a strawberry buttercream that has all these speckles in it and chunks of strawberry. So don't worry if your cake isn't completely smooth today. And it's definitely something you can get a little bit obsessive about when smoothing the sides of your cake, because you want it as perfect as can be. But there's got to be a time that you just stop, because you don't want to scrape all of your buttercream off. And I think I'm at the point with mine where I'm going to stop, because I don't want to scrape any more off. You'll notice here how I'm getting those rough edges at the top. And that's what I kind of want, because I'm going to use those to pull the buttercream into the center to get that sharp, clean edge. So with a clean offset spatula, that's what we're going to do. Another hack that I do like to use when I'm in my kitchen is, first of all, I like to use tools that are like the stainless steel. I don't like to use the plastic scrapers unless I'm using like one of those kinds that have the pretty design, because I like to actually run this under hot water and then wipe it dry and then smooth my cake, because the warmth really allows the buttercream to just kind of smooth together, and it works beautifully. So that's another good tip to help get those smooth edges. So now I'm going to the top of the cake where these roughed edges are, and I'm just going to hover over them and slide it to the center. And it gets rid of that rough edge, and it makes it a nice sharp edge. So I'm just going to go around the top of the cake and do that. They like the tips? Good. I hope they're useful. So I'm just going around the edge, and I'm gently pulling that buttercream toward the center, and it's kind of just smoothing itself out. At this point too, this is when you could also run this spatula under hot water and then wipe it dry and then do it, and you'll notice it's a lot easier and it just smooths itself out. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. So now the next part is the cake drip. So Joyce is going to heat this up for me. I'm just going to take the top off of the drip, and we'll put it in the microwave for about 30 seconds. And then after that's heated up, we'll give it a good shake and we'll make our drips. The Satin Ice Cake Drip is amazing because it tastes delicious, and you don't have to make your cake drip homemade. It's ready to go out of the microwave in 30 to 60 seconds. And it's very easy to use because of the easy squeeze bottle and the tip, and it just works great. One thing I'll say too is if you're using a cake that's really cold right now and you're using the cake drip, you're going to notice that the cake drip's going to set really fast. That's okay for the drips. The hotter the cake drip is, the thinner it's going to be and the more it's going to run down your cake. So you might want to do like a couple test strips on a plate or something just to get, to see what the consistency is like. This is perfect. Thank you, Joyce. So my cake drip is heated, and now I'm just going to give it a good shake. Another thing I want to mention is if you don't use the cake drip all in one sitting. You can always heat it up and do it again. And I will say, since it's chocolate, in the tip of this, like if you save this and use it again later, the chocolate might solidify into the tip. But the cool thing is that this tip actually pops off. I'm not going to do it right now, but it pops off and you can run it under hot water to clean it so that the chocolate easily flows through. Okay, so the first thing for the drip is we're going to just go along the edges. And with the drip, you can be super precise and do a drip at a time, or you can have fun and kind of just flow the drip and kind of have it like flow down the sides of the cake, kind of not sloppy, but not perfect drips. So it depends what style drip you want. Today, there's a question.
Will the warm drip melt the buttercream?
The warm drip. So right now, I think it's okay, especially if you're working with a cold cake, and I don't have access to a fridge right now, but you can put your cake in the fridge for like 10 to 15 minutes to solidify it a little bit before adding the drip. You don't want it to be so cold though, so that the cake drip doesn't like starts to set right away. Yeah, and this isn't boiling hot, so I think it should be okay with the buttercream. But if you are worried about that, you can always pop your cake in the fridge for 10 to 15 minutes just to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay, so I'm going to start dripping. First, we're going to drip to the sides and then we'll fill in the top. So I'm going to do it kind of the precise way. I'm not going to do it with a bunch of drips along. So I can't really explain the other way that I'm talking about, but basically you would just keep squeezing around and around and it would kind of like be wavy drips and it's really pretty, but okay. So for longer drips, you're going to squeeze longer. For shorter drips, you'll squeeze shorter. So, and I like to do alternating drips around the cake too. First of all, let's see if my chocolate solidified in this cap a little bit. So this is the perfect example. Because we heated it up earlier for the strawberries, the chocolate in the top settled a little bit, and you'll see that here. And that's normal. It's because it's chocolate. So you could take if this does happen, you could take a toothpick and kind of just poke it in there just to like help reduce any of the clogging. And if it happens that it's in the actual tip itself, you can run that under hot water, or you can even remove the whole cap and run it under hot water. I think this should be good now. What I like to do is I always kind of like to do a test over my garbage. So I'm going to do that. Okay, it's coming out. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to start on the sides. So I'm just going to do one. I'll put this to the front so you can see it. So I like to alternate my drips. So I'm just going to go around and I'm going to squeeze shorter for some, longer for some. So this is what it's looking like so far. It's a really pretty effect. And if you notice your cake drip is too thick, like you didn't heat it up enough, just pop it back in the microwave for 10 to 15 seconds and just give it a really good shake. So that's what it's looking like all around. Some people actually even just do the edge of the cake because it's really pretty and you don't fill in the center. It kind of looks really cool like that, but I want to fill in the top. So to fill in the top, you could do this multiple ways. If you didn't feel like squeezing this all along the top, you could actually remove the cap and kind of not fully dump it, but pour some out and use your spatula to smooth it. I'm going to just do it this way with squeezing. So I'm just going to start squeezing it along the top. You don't want to do too much that it's going to start overflowing over your drips, but just enough so that you're going to be able to spread it. And it covers the top completely. And again, if you're working with a really cold cake, you're going to want to kind of move a little bit quickly at this point because the chocolate will start to set quickly. Just cleaning off my spatula, and then I'll use my spatula to smooth this out. So you gently want to kind of bring it to that outer edge where your drips start, just enough so that it touches that and it doesn't start to overflow the edge, just so that it creates a smooth top. So I'm kind of just like hovering my spatula over it and I'm just lightly moving it around. Nothing with too much pressure that's going to make this drip overflow the edge. And then you can smooth it out.
Does it turn into a hard shell?
The chocolate drip, depending on the temperature that it's at, it does harden. Like you'll see these strawberries that we did before. I can pick them up. They're hard, but it doesn't get as hard as if you were going to melt chocolate chips and they were going to set, and it doesn't get as hard as if you were using melting chocolate to what you would normally use to do dip strawberries, but it does solidify.
Does it have to be so thick?
Thick? It doesn't have to be thick, no. Okay, so at this point, we want to wait for the top to solidify a little bit. And if you needed to, you can always put your cake in the refrigerator to get it to that point. Let me see how much buttercream I have. I don't think I have enough buttercream to do the dollops on top. So here's what I'm going to do. I don't have enough buttercream enough to do the big dollops on top that I wanted to. And I think that's because I did the cake, I did like a little taller.
So let's do a couple.
I'll do a couple. It's a good, so what I'm going to do is though, see how I have this bigger open star tip? I'm going to do a smaller star tip. So I use less buttercream and hopefully I can make it all the way around. Maybe I'll just do half. That would look really pretty too. So let me just get a smaller tip, but I want to make sure that the tip is open. Just like this. So this is a smaller open star tip. I just want my chocolate to solidify a little bit more on top so that it doesn't move around under my buttercream. Okay. So when you're putting your piping tip into your piping bag, first of all, I like to use the disposable ones because it makes cleanup so much easier. If you're using those silicone ones, you have to clean them out and then let them dry. I like to use these plastic disposable ones. What I do is I put the piping tip all the way down to the bottom of the piping bag as much as I can. And that kind of helps me eye where I'm going to cut along the edge. You don't want to cut too much so that the piping tip slides out, especially when you're putting pressure with your hand when you're squeezing. So I like to press the piping tip down as far as I can to kind of gauge where I have to make my cut. And I see here I'm going to make my cut around right here so that the piping tip goes through. So I'm just going to make a little cut so I have a guideline. And then I'll slide the piping tip back up a little bit. Were there more questions?
Yeah, there's a question now. How long can you freeze an unfrosted cake in the freezer?
So someone asked, how long can you freeze an unfrosted cake in the freezer? I think things last a very long time in the freezer. I would say 3 to 6 months. I think that's fair. Yeah, I would make sure it's wrapped really good. I would wrap it in saran wrap. And then what I do is I wrap it in saran wrap, then I wrap it in foil, and then I put it in a freezer safe Ziploc bag. And I do each layer on its own. Okay, so now when I'm filling my piping bag, there's a few ways you could do this. You can get a really tall glass and you can put your piping bag in and kind of fold the bag over the glass. So it creates a nice opening for you and you can use your 2 hands to put the buttercream in. Another way you can do it is hold the piping bag, fold, and kind of like cup it. You're gonna kind of create a cup with your hand, fold the piping bag down your hand, and it creates a nice cup. And then, but then you only have one hand to. So again, I have a very small amount of buttercream left, but I'm going to place it in my piping bag. I'm going to try to get as much as I can out of this bowl. And I may be surprised. I may have enough. I'm just going to do small dollops around. I'm not going to do really tall dollops with a lot of buttercream. Okay. So I can tell my cake drip is starting to set. So that's good. And since we are working with chocolate drip and chocolate covered strawberries, after you make this cake, I would definitely store it in the refrigerator. Our buttercream is shelf stable though. So if you were just using our buttercream, you can keep it out at room temperature, but definitely, I would definitely keep it in the refrigerator. Okay. So normally I'll give you this tip. If I was doing big dollops of buttercream that take up more space, I like to start on one side. So I would do a dollop here. Then I would move directly across. I would do another dollop there. And then I would move to the sides and do a dollop here, dollop there. And then I would do diagonal. And that kind of creates an even spacing between your dollops on top of your cake. When you're doing small little dollops like I'm about to do, it's not as stressful creating enough space for your dollops. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squeeze. I'm going to stop squeezing before I pull up so that the buttercream dollop doesn't extend tall and get droopy. It's just a nice short little dollop. So I'm going to squeeze, stop squeezing, slowly pull up. Uh-oh. Okay, here we go. I fixed the camera. Okay. And we're just going to go around. Again, we're going to see how much I have to go around. Hopefully I can make it. And the thing is, since I'm using a smaller piping tip, the strawberries are starting to clog the tip a little bit. So we'll see how this goes. So again, I'm squeezing, I stop squeezing, and I slowly pull up. And that creates a really clean dollop. All right, I think I'm gonna make it all the way around. I did it. So if you have only a small amount of buttercream left, you can improvise and just do small dollops. You don't have to always do those tall spiral dollops. Now we are going to finish it off and we are going to add our chocolate covered strawberries. So I'm going to move things around. I dipped 6 strawberries because I am working with a smaller cake. So we're gonna see how many I can fit around. Oops, here we go. Sorry that keeps happening. Okay, so we're gonna just start placing our strawberries. I'm just gonna randomly place them along the top.
If you do tall spirals, you would use a larger.
Yeah, to do the tall spirals around, I would use like before I had a larger star tip, and I recommend using a larger star tip when using this buttercream because of the fact that there's the specks of strawberries in it. So something larger like this and something that's open, and then you would just keep going around and then you'll have a bigger dollop. One of my strawberries lost its stem, but okay, so I just evenly place my strawberries along the top of the cake. And it's done. Looks delicious. Does anyone have any other questions?
No, but got a few people. That's some nice things. Lorena
Very nice.
said, you did a great job.
Thank you. Okay, so like I said before, I would store this cake in the refrigerator until you consume it. You can always take it out. I find that cake tastes best at room temperature, so I like to take my cake out like an hour before I'm going to serve it. This way it cuts nice and it tastes good. It's not too firm. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, you guys are welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining today's class. My next class is another Valentine's Day class, and that is in
February 8th.
It's February 8th. Thank you, Joyce. On February 8th, I have another Valentine's Day class, and that is going to be working with Satin Ice modeling chocolate. So if you've never used modeling chocolate and you want to get some tips and tricks for that, definitely sign up for that class. We're going to be making a little teddy bear cake topper, and it's holding a heart. So it would be a really cute addition to any of your Valentine's Day cakes. It would actually look really cute on a cake like this. So definitely sign up for that class. It is free. And we will see you there February 8th. And I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much.